Hello, Elizabeth Starling. Thank you so much for being on the Authors on Audio podcast. We're here today to discuss your book, which I have here, Reign of the Glittering Flames. So how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Well, I say that, but I did have a bit of an adventure this morning, if you want like a 2-minute segue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I awoke to an entity in my house, and this entity was the ghost that decided to haunt my espresso machine. I was like trying to make my coffee this morning, and I kid you not, it just started spraying water, like the whole tank of water, like through the little like steam wand and through the like other area, like just all of it coming out. And I was like with a towel and like trying to like keep it from going everywhere. Anyway, I had to go out and get some coffee from my favorite local place to be caffeinated. But I was like, man, today of all days, my espresso machine decides to be haunted. So
It's always at the inconvenient moments, and there is never a convenient time for an espresso machine to malfunction. Mm-hmm. That is always a recipe for just like the worst morning. So I'm so sorry about your espresso poltergeist that decided to wreak havoc on your morning, but you made it and you have your coffee. So you had a fun idea to do like a little show and tell. So you want to start the conversation off with, you can show me what you brought and I'll show you my little thing here.
Yeah, so I've worked in remote like tech for a really long time, and you do end up doing things like this where it's like you just want to feel each other's lives, and so you find things in your house and show each other like little show and tell things. And so I brought a painting that I did because I'm a trained designer and artist, and so I've got this painting. See there we go. That it's not so shiny.
Oh my
But
God.
this is my cat. Her name is Kari. She actually, unfortunately, passed away last summer. She was 17 years old.
Oh my
but
God.
the reason why I wanted to share this was because in my book, there's a cat. And I just feel like her personality, her like mannerisms live on through this cat in my book. And so I was like, it's relevant. I can show Kari and just like, have a cute little cat lady moment.
Oh, I love it. I'm so sorry about Kari. Losing a pet is the worst, but I love, oh, it makes it so much more. This is why I like talking to authors after reading their books. It just brings the book to life even more, because you could start piecing together like the influences from the author's life, and that's so cool. You're an amazing artist, by the way. That is so
you.
cool. Yeah, awesome.
It's like, I think that one, I've done 2 different ones in that style. I think this one was 7,200 squares. So I like gridded out every square and painted each one individually, and then put the silver leaf on there, and then covered it with this epoxy resin. And it was in a local art show at the Orlando Museum of Art many, many years ago, but its title was space_cat.gif. So it's like kind of blending my tech background with my fine art background and my cat.
I love it. So what I brought is, I don't think what I brought is nearly as cool, but it is relevant to my writing. It's actually this candle that I got for Christmas last year. I don't know if you can read it. It says, "And one day the girl with the books became the woman writing them."
I love that.
So yeah, my sister-in-law got me this one, and when I opened it, I started crying because, it's just something. I think writers get so sentimental about their books that
That's special.
It was really special.
I love candles like that. Like a couple book conventions I've been to, there's like different candle vendors that sell like either inspirational bookish candles like that, or like literally I bought like the Rowan scented candle.
Nice.
And like, just the girly things when you go to the book convention.
Man, I always struggle with those so much because my book boyfriend of all time is actually Lucian from ACOTAR.
Mm-hmm.
He's
I
just
saw
my
your
favorite.
videos about this.
Yeah, I have a really super weird obsession. The problem is not a lot of people share this obsession, so there's not as much Lucian merch as there is like Azriel or Cassian or recent merch. So I cannot find the Lucian candle, and if I could find it, I would swipe it up so fast. I imagine it would smell like cinnamon or something like that. But maybe I'll just have to make it myself.
now I'm going to be on the lookout. And like, I don't want you to be surprised if like a Lucian candle just shows up at your house one day and be like, oh wait, that was that one lady I talked to sending me a Lucian candle she found.
You'd become my best friend overnight, just like snap of the fingers. So anyway, let's talk about you and your writing and your book. So I always like to start off asking, how did you get into writing? Where did this all start?
Yeah, so I didn't start out being a writer. Spoiler alert, because I mentioned a few times that I worked in tech, but I was always like a storyteller, and like I went to university and had all my training in a different form of communication, which is nonverbal communication, i.e. design and art. And so I'd gone like really far down like that medium of storytelling, where it's like you're not using words to communicate what you're trying to get across to the viewer. And I'd always kind of had in my head, though, it's like I would also like to use the medium of words to like tell a story, but I had like really low confidence about it. And I just thought like, there's no way that like I can do verbal communication well. And, some various things happened over the years where like I got into like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, and I decided, like, it was just like maybe 3 years ago at this point, I'm like, wow, so much it's passed so quickly, that I kind of reclaimed my experience as a dungeon master. I had tried doing it when I was like in my early 20s, and it just did not go well. And so I wanted to reclaim that experience with the Lord of the Rings campaign. And there's tons of like modules and material you can use, so you don't have to write it all yourself. But I'm like reading through all these modules, and I'm like, this isn't very Tolkien, and this isn't very like, I don't know, cinematic, and like the themes you get in Tolkien that I really wanted to have in the game. And so I ended up rewriting a lot of the modules for my players. And then that kind of like gave me a little confidence boost of like, maybe I can do it with words. Like, I know I can do it with pictures, but maybe I can do it with words too. And then we were going to play a game where I was finally going to get to be the player again. And I was really excited about that. And we talked about it being like a darker campaign that had like some dark elements and stuff like that. And so I pull up my D&D character sheet and I make Rain as my character that I'm going to play. And we're getting it all together. I wrote a 1-page character backstory for her and stuff. And then, the worst boss for all D&D groups is schedules. And so we did not defeat the schedule boss. That campaign never happened. And I was so sad. And I didn't want to let Rain die, like, in the character sheet. And so I was like, what if I just, like, wrote her story? Can I do that? And so I started writing. I wrote, like, the first 8 chapters, and then I showed it to my husband, and I was like, he's always really honest, like, even if it is not good to hear, honest with me. And so I was like, do you think I should keep writing? And he read through it, and he was like, I think you should keep writing. And so I did, not really even thinking I was going to share it with anyone. I just wrote what I wanted to read and what I wanted her story to be and what made me happy and reflected on my own experiences. And then I shared it with more and more people, and they were like, I like this. And like, this did something for me. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what that looks like to like, share it more broadly. And so, I would say that's like how I got into professional writing, like my trajectory there.
So how did you land on the spicy romantasy niche? Because you bring up Lord of the Rings, which is more like kind of that epic, high fantasy, really deep world building. You do a ton of world building in your book for sure. But how did you kind of wiggle in there?
Yeah, I'll say as a side note, I will die on the hill that the Legolas and Gimli relationship was the first touch her, touch him, and you die like dynamic. Because think about like when the Rohirrim are circling them and he's like, like your head would hit the ground before you, whatever he says. Anyway,
they're such enemies to lovers.
Yeah. And so anyway, I kind of like every eldest millennial daughter kind of like got sucked back into fae romance and like all this stuff several years ago. This was like before I started the Lord of the Rings campaign, and like ACOTAR gave me the biggest book hangover like ever. And I tried to find stuff to replace it, and it was just really hard. And I think I had always liked romance, but something that was always really frustrating about me was how they would hide and or like kind of fade to black the really intimate parts. And I think maybe it's because I grew up in the South and we're all like really sexually repressed. But I was just like, I liked this idea of like thinking about it positively, and like what if you're exposed to these things from a like positive angle and not like a, I don't know. I've never been like a huge fan of dark romance, just putting that out there. Just like, I don't know, getting to experience those moments beyond. And it just, for some reason, like in my soul, it felt cheap to like put in all this work to the romance and then just be like, okay, because we're proper ladies, time to shut the door and not talk about what happens. But then it's like, but then how do people know like what it's like to be in a, you know, positive consensual sexual relationship? I don't know. Anyway, that's what my inner monologue's doing when I think about that.
No, I love that. I definitely think, you know, as I too have entered the cult of fae romantasy, it definitely does post things, you know, sexuality so in such a positive light that is not necessarily something I think a lot of women in particular have grown up with. So it's sort of freeing in that way, which I do think is a part of why it's become so popular. It gives women just space to be able to express themselves and explore, you know, this part of themselves in a way that is healthy. So yeah, no, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and I think there's enough like darkness in our lives already that like I don't even care if it's like unrealistic of like most relationships or most people's experiences. It's like I want an escape that's like positive, I don't know, and like does something for me mentally where I can just escape that is what is the darkness of like what everything happening around us.
So can you take me through your writing process? Like, what does it look like? Okay, you have this idea of Rain that you got from your Dungeons and Dragons campaign. How did you go from that little character to this bad boy right here? Walk me through that process.
Yeah, so I think like the more I've written and the more I've learned about what I think my preferred process is, I would say that at present, I'm more of like a mix of like a plotter and a pantser, but I will defend that the pantsing is really in like that Dungeons and Dragons kind of way, where it's a very yes and like these characters are so strong that you can put them in any situation and just you can see what they would do. Like I know that's weird sounding, but it's just like their character is so defined that it's like you put any variable around them and it's like, oh yeah, they would do this or they would do that, and it kind of just helps write the story. And so with Rain's book, I was still kind of like going through some of the growing pains of like, this is the longest form thing I had written. I had a lot of elements that I knew I wanted to hit on. Like I knew that I wanted this to happen, that to happen. Some of them I didn't know how I was going to get there, but that's where the really fun pantsing came in, where it was like, maybe because of my experience being in Dungeon Master, it's like you're constantly at the 10,000 foot view while you're writing, looking for those little strings to connect and like where the little things will come in. And it might be like one little string that connects you to the end, but it's like making you choose a particular word in like what you're working on right now and on that page. And from a like technical perspective, like I do a lot of daydreaming and writing on my phone, and I'll open up the notes app and I have like many little notes docs with like things I've dumped in there, like bits of dialogue, writing out descriptions of things that I want to happen. I have some like Excel sheets that like kind of have step by step my different acts and like what I want to happen to them in them. And then I've also got what I call chemistry tests, where like I'll take two characters that I think like can have a thing together, and then I'll actually write a scene to like test their chemistry, like I don't know if you were doing a movie casting or something. And that's really helped me like figure out like where some characters want to go versus where I want them to go, because like I said, they kind of take on a really strong personality and direction themselves. And that happened for Rain's best friend Freda. My second book, which I'm currently going through developmental edits on, is from her point of view. And the first person that I had written a chemistry test for her with made me realize that they were not the one. And so it was like, wow, like it's like the kind of thing where it's like I'd spent months thinking like, yeah, it's going to be them and like this is going to happen, that's going to happen. I start writing it and I'm like, oh no, like this is not it. Like they do not belong together.
It's so interesting. I once heard J. Maas actually does something similarly. If she's thinking of shipping two characters together, she'll write a scene of them kissing and just see how that feels and like try it on for size. And you know, she's said sometimes she's just like, ew, no, that doesn't work. Did you get that from her or?
I think so. Like, because I've seen some of her interviews. I don't remember honestly like how I came across it. I wouldn't be surprised if I just kind of like saw it in one of her interviews or like by osmosis of the Maas verse, just like, oh, I should try doing that with my characters. But I ended up doing that, and it was so interesting. I did it for Rain and Leander too, and the scene that I wrote for them in the very beginning, I was still trying to even figure out Leander, like what's his whole deal and like what is going on with him. And I never even used that scene like this. That scene is nowhere in the book in any like form whatsoever, but it was so helpful. So yeah, I'm not afraid to like write some things and be like, yeah, but we're not using that. Like that was just an exercise, like, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you wish you knew when you started this whole writing process? What's one of the biggest lessons?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson that I learned just had to do with like my confidence and like the kind of like the negative self-talk that was preventing me from even trying. And so it's like, I wish that I just tried sooner, but there's also a weird like element to this where it's like the specific journey that I went on and like some of the, you know, trials, tribulations, pain and joy that I experienced through this process, I feel like I had to experience to like get to here. And so it's like, I wouldn't want to take away any of those things, even the things that were like hard or painful. But I do like feel sad about the amount of like times where I had this like story idea or this character idea, and then I thought, oh, but I can't do that, like because I'm a visual designer, like I don't use words to do these things, and then I would like go off and like draw them or try to do like sequential narrative, like comics and stuff, and it just like never really felt quite right because I think I was just feeding into that negative like self-talk trying to hold me back, you know. On the like technical side, there's like I feel like I could write books about just like self-publishing and the publishing industry and stuff in general that I think would absolutely have been great to know before I got into it. Mistakes that I made that I can't take back because publishing industry is really they're like 10 years behind technology wise, everything else. And so it's just all these really old systems, and maybe it's me with my tech background used to everything being really fast and efficient and having connections and whatever. But yeah, there's a lot on the technical side where I'm like, if I meet another author and they're like, I don't know how, you know, Ingram Spark works, or I don't know how this like metadata in my books works. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Like, let's talk about this. Like, before you go in and like do some things, I can help you.
That's like the part that scares me the most about independently publishing is that kind of like technical side of things, because I can write a book, like no problem, that's what I do, like, but actually dealing with all of the moving parts of getting it published is like so overwhelming. So if you ever want to write that book one day, send it my way, because I would absolutely read it.
Yeah, and I mean, my part of my work in tech was also doing tech education, where I like taught young designers like how to do design, and especially from like a web development and like branding perspective and stuff like that. And so the like teacher in me will never die. So I always tell like other people, like my DMs are like always open. Like if you have a question or just like you come across something and you're like, I wonder if like, you know, Elizabeth knows about this. Then it's like, yeah, like I am always like, yes, like knowledge should be free and accessible. Like, please, let's help each other.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's definitely like the beautiful thing about the indie writing community is like every single indie author I've met, and even the traditionally published ones too. I don't want to like excommunicate them just because, you know, they have a different path. But like, I think authors and writers in general is like, they're just like such helpful, nice people that genuinely want to see other writers make it and lift people up. There's like sometimes in the arts, I come from a theater background, and theater can be a little like, I think it was Helen Mirren who once said actors are jealous creatures. Mm-hmm. And it's a good way of putting it. I don't feel that same level of like mean girl competition in the writing community so much.
Yeah, I haven't felt that either. And like, especially like graphic design, which is where I started, it can get a little mean girl. Like it can definitely be like that, which is why I enjoyed being a teacher of that subject so much, because I'm just like, we're not doing any of that bullshit. Like, let's make you the best designer we can be, and I'm not hiding anything from you. Like, we're gonna figure it out.
So, okay, let's talk about Rain. Let's talk about your book and get into some of the more book-related questions. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, there's this theme. Rain is kind of constantly searching for home over the course of the book. Can you talk about that evolution from like chapter 1 to, you know, without spoiling anything too much, to the last chapter? Talk to me about that theme specifically.
Yeah, so Rain's character, she's very sheltered. And so she, you know, grew up on this estate with her aristocratic family, but they had also shunned her at the same time for what she was, which was, you know, born of a contract with the devil, so looking like one. And she kind of wanted to like break down her environment to like find that new home environment, but at the same time she's got these like preconceived notions of like how she pictures it will be when she goes to like the place that is finally home. And so I really wanted to like have her break it down like twice, where it's like we're breaking down the environment and finding that new environment, which is home, but then she also has to break down her perception of like what she thinks home will be, and it gets challenged at like different times throughout the book, where, you know, she thinks it's going to be with like her devil dad that like signed the contract, but she starts finding out more about him and she's like, wait a second, like, is this really like what I was thinking? And so I would say she's like a little bit delusional, like in the beginning, where it's like, it's all butterflies, rainbows, I'm gonna go find my devil dad and it's all gonna work out. But then as real life and things that she has no control over start kind of like blending in, and especially people and entities she has no control over kind of interacting with her in her life, she has to adjust that perception and kind of really figure out where this idea of home like fits in.
Yeah, so I know there's kind of an emphasis, I would say there's like a found family trope, if you want to call it that, in the book. She starts off having that found family with Frida, and Frida's family, why does it not feel like quite enough for her? She still feels the need to go on this journey.
Yeah, I would say that like Frida's probably the closest person that she is like with, because of her whole family dynamic and stuff like that. There's also a lot of stuff that she has hidden from Freda, and like Freda didn't really have insight into like how abusive her family was, and like that her, you know, grandfather's just straight up killing people and stuff like that. And so at the same time, because Rain was so sheltered, she was never allowed to like go visit Freda's family and like even be in Freda's room. And so it's like they're close when they're at school, but then there's like a little bit of missing depth to like their relationship. And so I wanted there to be like some development there as well, and not just like page 1 everything is peachy keen with the best friend, you know. I wanted to kind of see that develop more, where it like feels more like, okay, if we have found family with Freda, it's like, I don't know, feels more earned, and like we've, you know, shared some things with each other. Rain gets to see what Freda's home life is like and like some of the struggles that they go through, and Freda gets to see firsthand how terrible her family is, and so I kind of pictured as a little bit of like the seed of found family is there with Freda, and then by the end of the book, it's like they've both kind of contributed towards like making that a bit more real. And then In my second book that I'm working on now, that goes even farther, and there's like more trajectory with the like kind of loving relationship you have with like a best friend.
I'm really interested in the second book. I know, I'm sure. So is it? If you can't tell me yet, that's totally fine. But would you say it's more like Freda focused as opposed to being an extension of Rain and Leander's story, or?
So it's the way that I kind of view my characters in general is that everyone's a main character. And so I want to have the POV of each one that I've begun to develop in Rain's book. And so Rain's book is from her POV with like a couple Leander chapters. The next book picks up right where Rain's book left off, but from Freda's POV. So it's kind of like giving each character their main character moment and like their like little arc they get to go through to have their character development and stuff like that. But Rain is there. She's an integral, huge part of the plot of the second book, and so is Leander. And you get to see more of their development, but it's also interesting because you get to see their development as a couple from another person's perspective. And so I actually really love Freda's perspective on it, because it's like she'll see them together and they're like in their honeymoon like period and whatever, and she's like, oh my god, this is so annoying or gross, but it's like cute, like grossly cute, you know what I mean, where it's like, oh, I'm glad she's happy, but like, ugh.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Rain's mom, because she's a smaller character, but I found her so interesting. Can you talk to me about her psychology a little bit and how she views Rain? Because reading it, I got the sense that she loves her daughter but feels the need to keep her at arm's distance. What were you going for as the writer?
Yeah, I think Rain's mom's name is Lydia, so I'll refer to her as Lydia. I would argue that she's like a true morally gray, like girly over here. Like there's a lot of morally gray characters that are really just good characters, but with like darkness like clothing or something. I think Lydia really is like a morally great character, and I think the unfortunate thing about her life and her experiences is that, you know, it is unfortunately very common in like generational cycles of abuse to kind of like have these things move from like generation to generation. And so you see how terrible her own father is, and like, and intentionally there's not a single word written about her mother in the entire book. So it's like to be revealed kind of what's going on there. But it's just, I wanted to kind of show like, if you had an imperfect person and an imperfect person who suffered like terrible things, just trying to cope with like all of the stuff around them. Like unfortunately don't think that everyone is like always 100% healthy, able to fix themselves with everything they go through in life. And that's just how it is sometimes. So I kind of see her as like, she probably thinks she's doing her best because she's not as bad as her own father. But us, the reader, the outside perspective, can kind of see that it's like, no, like it's still bad, you know? And I wanted there to, you mentioned that you get the sense that she loves her. I think that she like likes the idea of her but at the same time, I think it's painful for her because of how it all transpired. And like, it pretty early in the book, you kind of find out that when she was younger, you know, she had this lover that was a carriage driver, and she, you know, winds up pregnant, just like in every, like, you know, a historical romance with the carriage driver. And her grandfather, being the evil man he is, though, is basically like, well, I'm going to kill this boy and I'm going to fix everything and like get it all, whatever. And so to save his life, she makes a deal with a devil, but devils are not good characters either. And so she doesn't realize that in order to save him, it was going to kind of curse Rain with this appearance. And I think that probably was one of the more traumatic things for her, because it's like she loves the child, she's trying to save it, she's trying to save her lover, and then she thinks she's got it all figured out, but then Rain's born and she's not human. And so yeah, it's like complex kind of like layers of traumatic things that kind of driving how she acts, and in her actions being imperfect and not an example of like someone who's 100% like mentally, I don't know, deconstructed or regulated.
Yeah, I really liked the way she was written, just from a perspective of something that I think gets overused sometimes in fantasy is the almost like wicked stepmother kind of trope where, you know, a parent figure is either supremely good, and then they usually get killed off if they're supremely good, or like supremely evil. And it's nice to see kind of a more humanized parent that seems to have evolved in a way that is realistic given the hand she was dealt in life, which I think is why, even though she's maybe a more minor character, my radar just kind of immediately latched onto her.
I even have notes about like how I would like to write like a Lydia novella that like covers those younger years, and because people have told me that they're very interested in Lydia's backstory and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's I don't know, I think with me kind of picturing every character as a main character, it makes it really interesting to me as the writer to like, I don't feel overly attached to Rain where I have to stay in her world. It's like we could go off here and see what's going on in Lydia's world like 30 years ago. What was that like?
So speaking of mothers, I want to avoid spoiling anything too much, but in the book you play with the idea of almost kind of divine masculine energy and divine feminine energy, and there's a lot of juxtaposition there. Can you kind of talk to me about those comparisons and how, at least in the context of your story, the world is a little bit better off when it kind of tilts more toward that kind of divine feminine energy? Talk to me about that a little bit, and those kind of, I don't know that you would call them gods. I guess they were devils, right? If I'm remembering correctly.
They are gods. So if you're thinking of the primordial father and the primordial mother, they're deities. And I think the way that I kind of, I guess, high level have them framed in my mind is the primordial father is like the order character, like they value order and control over things, and the primordial mother is more like the chaos character and the freedom character. And so I kind of view it as like you go too far in one direction and things could get a little messy. And so, as you said, like at the end of the book, we kind of do have this transition to the more feminine divine energy. I would almost say we're transitioning to that chaos energy. And not that I don't know that I would necessarily say feminine is always chaos, but I would reframe it to like order versus chaos. And that is a thing that we get to observe in Freda's book, is like, what does that mean when we shift from the plane is ruled by order and control versus the plane is ruled by chaos and freedom? I think examples of like how you just kind of get to see this a little bit with the primordial mother's character. She has like the control and order placed on her because the primordial father like imprisons her because he doesn't want her to be free, because that idea of chaos, the thing you can't control, it would be like the greatest fear of a control character that wants to control everything. And so, but she has a couple representations, like the glittering flames, for example, is a representation of her, and like fire being like that chaos thing that like can, I don't know, get out of control, or like can be chaotic and just how it is as a, you know, chemical reaction. And so I think that in terms of like how it's better or worse, or I would just say different, is like really addressed more in Freda's book, because you get to kind of see it on the page of like, well, what happens when you change the gods and stuff like that. So I won't give too many details there, but that's kind of how I have it framed, is like order versus chaos.
Super interesting. And it definitely, it kind of reminds me of like yin yang, where you need both of these opposites to create balance. And it seems like the universe you've built is still sort of tipped out of balance, because now you've gotten rid of the order completely and the chaos is in charge. So that's a interesting way to kind of reframe it. Makes me curious about book 2 once again. I want to know where it goes.
There's some other like elements that like, you know about because you've read the book, but it's not like a shift to pure chaos because, the power dynamics in general have changed, but it is completely different than like how things were before. And so I've always been a huge fan of like, fantasy and or like just stories in general where it's like, especially if it's a save the world situation, like I'm not sure if there's ever a single time where it's like you do all this stuff, you save the world, and then from that point on, everything is just perfect. Like there's not like repercussions. There's not like an aftermath or like something else that has to be addressed. And the way I really think about it is like the characters fighting for a future might not be the characters who get to live in that future. It's like the next generations. And so, I was thinking about that a lot too, where it's like, okay, if we're going to have this power shift, what happens? Like nothing's going to be perfect. Like things have gone out of balance, like you said again. So what does that mean?
Totally. It reminds me of, I don't know if you're a Brandon Sanderson fan, but his book Mistborn, he does the same thing. The entire premise of the subsequent series is like, you have, the first book is kind of its complete arc, and then you have the next book is like, what happens in the aftermath of the good guys winning? Which is such an interesting question. I'm so glad you're asking it in the creation of your books, because even if you look at just history, it's never as simple as like, oh yay, we've toppled the regime, now everyone gets to live happily ever after. Like that is just not how it works.
Yeah, like topical. I've been listening to a history podcast called The Rest is History about the year 1066. And it's when like the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans were all fighting each other for control of England. And then anyway, William the Conqueror comes in, conquers everything, takes it all over, ends the war, but plunges England into the Dark Ages.
Let's talk about the romance. You lean into just the very beloved idea of fated love. Dive into that a little bit for me, as much as you like to for, the purpose of your story. It's just my favorite. Like whenever there is any inkling in the book that is like fate has brought these two characters together, they were destined for each other. I just love it so much. So talk to me about those elements in your story.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of fated love as well. And I think this is one of the things that had kind of frustrated me about a lot of romantasy books, where they kind of have this idea that it's like, okay, it's like fated mates situation. It's some kind of unexplained biological, like, I don't know, they get matched and then they like can smell each other now, or like, I don't know, like it's always like, it feels kind of surface level, and it's like, but why are they connected together? So for me, it's always been like a topic close to my heart, because I, have been in a relationship with my husband for so long, like since we were 15 years old. We're like those people that, and so we have like experiences together where it's like, I feel like we are soulmates, like connected, like it just, the things that happened that, brought us together felt that way. And so whenever I see stories that have that more like, almost like cosmic feeling of connectedness, where it's like there's something cosmic going on that is maybe like borderline science fiction going on, that's like bringing them together, there's just like, even if you don't understand it, I feel like it adds more depth than like the like, we're fae and now I can smell you. I don't know, the smelling thing is just so funny to me. Anyway, I make jokes about the smelling thing in Freda's book.
Nice.
So I don't know, if you read it you'll see what I mean, but yeah. And I liked one of the aspects of like A Court of Mist and Fury that I really like, and if you haven't read A Court of Mist and Fury, I guess plug your ears like for the next 15 seconds or something.
If you haven't read it, what's wrong with you? Go do your homework.
But I like the way that it kind of comes together for them, where there's a period of time where like Reese knows, but then there's also like some inexplicable like events that happen where like Reese is getting the dreams, and it's of what Fair is painting on her dressers, and he just shows up at Calamai because it's like he has no idea like what's going on, and he just, you know, needs to get out from under the mountain and stuff like that, and sees her and like doesn't even understand what she is, but like knows that he's like drawn to her. And like, to me, that's a really good example of like it being more cosmic, where it's like, sure, they have the whole fae thing going on where they can smell each other, but there's like this other layer of like things have been in the works throughout their lives to like cosmically intertwine them. I'm a huge sci-fi fan as well, but like I love the idea of quantum entanglement, where it's like particles can get just like from millions of miles apart, like quantumly entangled and like move in sync with each other, like without, you know, faster than the speed of light and stuff like that. And so it's just, that's how I think about it, like cosmic physics, like way of like people connecting and being attached to each other.
I love framing it that way too. I didn't know about quantum entanglement. That's super, man. Every time
kind of spooky, like go read about it.
Yeah, 100%. As you're describing it, I'm like, you know, I'm definitely not like a huge science person, but every time I like, you know, try to wrap my head around physics or anything like that, I'm all, ooh, it feels like, yeah, spooky is the word that comes to mind. It's like, it feels like it shouldn't be possible. So I don't know, it almost, it gives me like the heebie-jeebies kind of.
I think too, like if you're like watching this and you're also a fan of like sci-fi, like I don't think it spoils anything for me to say that like there are times when you're reading my fantasy book that you're going to be like, wait a second, like are we shifting sci-fi a little bit? Like what's going on here?
We love a genre blender. I want to know, what is your favorite thing about Leander and Rain as a couple?
And I think at the silly like surface level, like have you heard the descriptions of like different kinds of like combinations of cupcake and like ability to kill you, where it's like acts like a cup, it's like there's like different combinations to describe personalities. There's like looks like a cupcake but can kill you.
Okay, yes.
Looks like can kill you but is a cupcake.
Yes, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I like at the like surface level, I like how Rain acts like a cupcake but she can kill you if she wants. And Leander acts like he will kill you, but for her, he is a big old cupcake. Like, and so at the high level, that's, you know, what I like about them. I love that like Rain is like delusionally determined in everything that she does, and that Leander is like delusionally devoted to whatever she wants to do, where it's like he's the kind of person that, you know, he will burn the world for her if he has to, but since she's expressed the desire to do it herself, he's like, how can I assist? Or like, you know, do you need me to hold them down while you punch them kind of situation? And so I like that it's like that they make each other better, and that it's like the, you know, earlier in the book there's like a very strong shift in like the power dynamic, where like Leander's this like multi-millennia-year-old devil who's very powerful, very dangerous, and so you see this imbalance of power between them. But towards the end of the book, that balance shifts a lot to being more equal, or, you know, you could argue shifting more in Rain's favor. And I like how by the end of it, it's like they're both making each other better, and you kind of lose some of that like power dynamic over each other, and it's more about just like the things that matter, like each other's like autonomy, love, and choice and stuff like that.
I want to talk about the indie publishing process and what that was like for you. You touched on it a little bit. I guess 2 questions is, why did you choose to go indie? Did you attempt to query your book and it didn't work out, or you just decided like not even to bother with traditional publishing? And what have been the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, so this is a topic I am very passionate about. And I won't like spend forever monologuing about it, but I'll reiterate to what I said earlier. My DMs are always open if you have questions about my perspective and experience on these things. But I had originally planned on doing everything trad. Like I was gonna query. I like had my publisher marketplace subscription and I was looking at all the deals and trying to look up agents and stuff like that. And the deeper I got into the research of it, learning about the industry and stuff like that, I realized that for me and my personality and like the way that I like to create and do things, that going trad was not going to like align with my soul, if that makes sense. And I think what it really came down to is, and maybe this is no surprise, but I'm a Capricorn. And so like everything that I do, it's like I have like the audacity or like the ambition to think that I can just do it. Like I don't need anyone else. And so for better, for worse, that's what we're dealing with here. And kind of saw that in trad publishing, everything moves very slowly. Like you might spend 6 months querying and then maybe you can land an agent, and you spend the next 6 to 9 months with the agent pitching to publishers, and then maybe a publisher does pick you up, everything works out, and then it'll probably be like another 2 years or something before your book actually gets published. And then at that point, when it finally enters the market, is when you really get to discover if what you've written is resonating with readers. And so you've put in like 3+ years of work to finally get that feedback. And like I said earlier, my background's in tech. I was a senior product designer and designed product experiences and like user experience type stuff for years. And I really value like getting feedback quickly so that I can very closely align with like what people are saying and like pivot if needed to and stuff like that quickly. And so that's one of the exciting things about self-publishing, is because even though there's a ton of work and business type stuff that you have to be like ready to deal with on that side, if you do have the kind of like personality and temperament for it, it can be really exciting because you can do things a lot faster than trad publishing. And I think Quicksilver is a great example. If you've read Quicksilver, where those were self-published first and they popped off, they got, the market showed that was a book that people wanted to read. And then all the trads started sniffing around like, hey, what if we took this now? What if we made it into a series? And what if we, blah, blah, blah. And so we're seeing a lot of that, like indies shifting to trad trajectory. And so I think going trad for like a debut didn't make sense to me because I don't have any proof behind me of like what I'm doing being profitable, which is all companies care about. Like they don't care about your emotional story, your emotional journey, or you as a person. Unfortunately, corporations only care about the money and the bottom line and stuff like that. And so I didn't want to like be the experiment, the like thing in their diverse portfolio that they maybe throw a couple dollars at, see if it succeeds or fails, but then ultimately I'm still doing all the work but with more restrictions because now I'm like under a larger publisher. I wanted to have that freedom to like, if I'm gonna prove that this is something that people like and that they find value in, I want to have control over the whole process and be able to really do it the best that I think it can be. And especially me being an author that talks to my readers and stuff, I feel like I kind of like am getting that feedback loop of like what people are liking, what they're craving for. Whereas like sometimes I feel like the bigger and bigger you get, you become more disconnected from like what's going on with like readers and book clubs day to day and stuff like that. So anyway, that was like a bit of a monologue, but like hopefully touched on all the areas where like this matters, I guess, to me, and like where I feel passionate about my decision to do what I did, which was I made an LLC and made my own publishing company and then published my book under it.
Yeah, again, I've been talking to Since starting this podcast, I've just been talking to so many more indie authors, and it's always interesting to hear their reasoning behind going indie, what that process looked like for them. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. The question that I absolutely have to get to, I ask all my authors this question, it's my favorite question, is what are some of the books that inspire you? You've already talked about Lord of the Rings. I'm seeing your Sarah J. Maas, and I think that's Fourth Wing back there. What are some of the books, could be movies too, just works of art that have inspired your work the most?
Yeah, I would say that, like, you already mentioned one, which is just Lord of the Rings. I'm like a super fan. Like, I have like Witch King cosplay and like all these different copies, and we play the games and stuff like that. I think, like, I'm trying to think of outside of Lord of the Rings. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. But like I think that's another thing that ties to like the fate stuff, which is why I like Doctor Who so much, is like, you know, you take a Bad Wolf or like the whole River Song like arc, and it's like that's exactly like what I want with like my fated, you know, connections. I love Firefly and Battlestar Galactica, and I love Avatar: Last Airbender, and
Oh, my dogs are named Toph and Iroh. They're not in the room right now, but yeah, I'm a huge fan.
I'm like dying off of all these Zuko memes that are.
Yes, I know. So I'm like, I always loved him, but holy cow.
I was a huge Zutara like
Yeah.
person. Like, I was, you know, upset that whatever, it's fine. It's only been like what, 20 years, like. And then yeah, I love the Sarah J. Maas books. I'm almost done with the Throne of Glass series. I'm a terrible reader because I can't read and write at the same time. Like, it like confuses my brain, and so I'll go through these, you know, sections of like, I'm only editing or I'm only writing. Okay, now we're taking a break from that, and now I can read something, and that's how I'll get like Quicksilver out, or like pick up the next Fourth Wing book and get through that. But yeah, the maybe boring answers, but those are some of the big ones for me.
No, I love it. I'm so glad to hear that you're a Whovian plus an Avatar fan, and like we've got a lot of the same tastes for sure. Elizabeth Starling, thank you so much for being on the Authors on Audio podcast. Everyone, pick up your copy of Reign of the Glittering Flames. It is such a great read. It's romantasy, but also doesn't feel cookie cutter, which is something I just crave, because I read a lot, and I read a lot of romantasy, and if something feels cookie cutter, I just put it down at this point. I'm so bored with all the same tropes. So this book is not that. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.